already exists, even if God is not quite known. Working with this knowledge allows us to be humble and generous, seeking God's wisdom and purpose with the people and creation we encounter. To me, this is an expression of prevenient grace. John Wesley, the founder of Methodism, described grace in multiple avenues, but he described God's grace that was extended throughout time and history of the world and our single lives, including prevenient grace. Prevenient grace is the grace that goes before us. It's the grace that is there even before we can acknowledge it, recognize it, and it is the grace that God allows us to have, whether we know it or not. Others are not a threat because God's grace is with them and for them as much as God's grace is for us. Joanne Arndt, an early leader of the Pietism movement that deeply influenced John Wesley, wrote, God shows us the way by his prevenient grace, which is bestowed on all men and women without exception. Somehow, through this grace, God is already at work, shaping and ushering people into their relationship with the divine and then each other. Thus, we are not alone in our work or trudging through it like some chore that we have to do while others play. To love with a robust compassion, generative hope, and humble care is the shared work of all humanity. We practice with our neighbor to love and heal vulnerably, receiving love and healing even in the giving. Once we engage with God's call to us to know God and care for all creation by our work in compassion, we are on our way. Unfortunately, there might be stumbling blocks. Unfortunately, there might be times when we lose heart, when we have failure to launch, when we have a loss of meaning. And this happens to individuals, leaders, and churches. According to Jim Martin, the author of Just Church, two reasons account for this reality. The first is a lack of courage. The other is a lack of humility. This week we had Bible study. It was my first time attending, and I'm so grateful for the group. As we gathered together to look at this book, The Return of the Prodigal Son by Henry Nouwen, which dives into that sweet story of Luke. All are invited Wednesdays at 10. The book of The Prodigal Son by Henry Nouwen takes us into his and our own reflection of this familiar and deep parable. And early on, Nouwen acknowledges what it takes to live out his vocation. And I would argue it's the first step for all of us in order to live this unusual method of work and compassion with grace and hope. Let me share what he said. I have to kneel before the Father, put my ear against his chest and listen, without interruption, to the heartbeat of God. Then and only then can I carefully and very gently hear what he says. I know now that I have to speak from eternity into time, from the lasting joy into the passing realities of our short existence in this world, from the house of love into the houses of fear, from God's abode into the dwellings of human beings. I am well aware of the enormity of this vocation. Still, I am confident that it is the only way for me. One could call it the prophetic vision, looking at people and this world through God's eyes. We are the unlikely materials, with the unusual methods entrusted with being the church in the neighborhood and the world. We can name the characteristics of this work in compassion, consider the challenges that require courage and humility, and learn to fully embrace the communal reality of being in Christ and Christo. And in it all, we must practice. We must practice humility, showing up with courage, seeking relationships with others, and doing so with God's vision and power for the healing and peace of the world. Each Sunday we ask for our daily bread. And if you are a Catholic or a former Catholic, you may have done the rosary that invited you to say the Our Father even more times than that. This daily bread is one of nourishment and a reminder of God's provision. I believe it's also a way of asking and committing ourselves to the courage and intention it takes to embody this expression of love. An unusual method for sure, and to allow ourselves and the whole world to experience it every day. So it is with similar courage and commitment that I want to offer this final prayer for all of us from St. Teresa of Avila. Will you pray with me? Christ has no body now on earth but yours, no hands but yours, no feet but yours. Yours are the eyes through which the compassion of Christ must look out on the world. Yours are the feet with which he is to do and go and do good. Yours are the hands with which he is to bless his